The crystal chandeliers cast bright light across the ballroom as Zara watched her world crumble in slow motion. Her husband Robert held another woman in his arms, spinning her across the dance floor like she was his bride. The woman laughed, throwing her head back with joy that should have belonged to Zara. After 17 years of marriage, after building a life together, after trusting him with her heart and her future, this was how it ended. The guests whispered behind champagne glasses. Some looked away in shame. Others stared with the hunger of people watching a car crash. Zara stood frozen near the edge of the dance floor, her anniversary dress suddenly feeling like a costume in a play she never auditioned for. "Zara, honey, maybe we should go," her sister Nicole whispered, touching her arm gently. "This is wrong. This is so wrong." But Zara couldn't move. She watched Robert dip the blonde woman Candace from his office. She now realized and saw the way he looked at her. Like she was precious. Like she was loved. Like she mattered. The song was At Last by Etta James. The same song they had danced to at their wedding. The same song that played during their first dance as husband and wife 17 years ago. Now he was dancing to it with someone else in front of everyone they knew. How long? Zara whispered to herself. How long has this been going on? She thought about the late nights at the office. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way he had been distant and cold for months. The way he barely looked at her anymore. All the signs had been there, but she had chosen to trust instead of doubt. She had chosen love instead of suspicion. Now she felt like the biggest fool in the room. The music swelled and Robert spun Candace again. She was younger than Zara, probably in her early 30s. Pretty in an obvious way, with perfect teeth and perfect hair and a perfect figure in a red dress that cost more than most people made in a month. A dress that Robert had probably bought her. Zara's hands shook as she set down her untouched champagne glass. The sound of crystal meeting marble echoed in her ears like a gunshot. Several people turned to look at her, their faces full of pity and embarrassment. She hated that look almost as much as she hated what she was seeing on the dance floor. "Zara," Nicole said again, more urgently this time. "Let's go. Now. Before this gets worse." But worse than what? What could be worse than this? What could be worse than watching your husband publicly humiliate you on the night that was supposed to celebrate your love? What could be worse than realizing that while you were planning a party to honor your marriage, he was planning his escape from it? The song ended and Robert kissed Candace's cheek. Not a friendly peck but a real kiss. Tender. Loving. The kind of kiss he used to give Zara when she mattered to him. That was when Zara understood. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or a mistake. This was a statement. This was Robert telling everyone, including her, that he had moved on. That he had found someone better. That their 17 years together meant nothing to him. The realization hit her like ice water. He had planned this. He had brought his mistress to their anniversary party on purpose. He wanted everyone to see. He wanted her to know that he was done pretending, done trying, done caring about her feelings or their marriage. "Mrs. Johnson?" A young waiter appeared beside her, holding a silver tray. "Your husband asked me to give this to you." With trembling fingers, Zara took the small white envelope from the tray. Her name was written across the front in Robert's familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words written in black ink. "I want a divorce. Robert." The paper fluttered to the ground as Zara's legs gave out. Nicole caught her arm, keeping her upright as the room spun around them. The music had started again, another slow song, and Robert was dancing with Candace once more, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just destroyed his wife's life with a note delivered by a waiter. "That's it," Nicole hissed. "We're leaving. Right now." But as Nicole tried to guide her toward the exit, Zara stopped. She looked across the room at Robert, still dancing, still smiling, still acting like he owned the world. Then she looked at all the faces watching her, some sympathetic, some curious, some just hungry for drama. Something cold and hard settled in her chest. Something that felt like steel wrapping around her heart. She had built this life. She had supported his career, managed their home, sacrificed her own dreams to help him achieve his. She had loved him completely, trusted him absolutely, and given him everything she had. And he repaid her with this. "No," Zara said quietly, straightening her shoulders. "We're not leaving. Zara, please. This is humiliating enough already." Zara smoothed down her black dress, the one she had bought specifically for tonight, the one she had thought would make Robert remember why he fell in love with her. She walked to the small stage where the band was playing and tapped the microphone. The music stopped. The dancing stopped. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. "Good evening, everyone," Zara said, her voice steady and clear. Thank you all for coming to celebrate what Robert and I thought was our 17th wedding anniversary. As you can see, my husband has other ideas about what we're celebrating tonight." A murmur went through the crowd. Robert finally looked at her, his face pale with shock. "I want you all to remember this night," Zara continued. "Remember what you saw here. Because by tomorrow morning, everything is going to be very different." She set the microphone down and walked out of the ballroom with her head held high. Nicole hurried after her, but Zara didn't look back. She didn't look at Robert's shocked face or Candace's embarrassed flush or the guests who were already pulling out their phones to record what came next. She had 17 years of love to mourn and a lifetime of revenge to plan. Zara woke up alone in the king-sized bed she had shared with Robert for over a decade. The space beside her was cold and empty, but that wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual was the clarity she felt, sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. She had cried herself out the night before. Now there were no more tears, only purpose. Robert hadn't come home. She checked his closet and found several suits missing, along with his favorite shoes and his travel bag. He had packed before the party. He had known he wouldn't be coming back. The house felt different in the morning light streaming through their bedroom windows. Everything looked the same: the furniture they had picked out together, the photos of their happier times, the artwork she had chosen, but it all felt like stage props now. Hollow. Like everything else in their marriage. Zara made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, staring at the granite countertops they had installed 3 years ago. Robert had complained about the cost then, but she had insisted. She loved to cook, and she wanted a beautiful kitchen where they could make memories together. Now she realized she had been the only one trying to make memories. Her phone buzzed with text messages. Nicole asking if she was okay. Her mother, who had heard about the party from Nicole. Several friends who had witnessed the disaster and didn't know what to say. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her laptop and started digging. Zara wasn't stupid. She had a degree in business and had helped Robert build his consulting company from the ground up. She knew how to read financial statements, how to track money, and how to spot discrepancies. She had just never thought she would need to use those skills against her own husband. She logged into their joint bank accounts first. What she found made her stomach drop. Over the past 6 months, Robert had been systematically moving money out of their joint accounts and into accounts she had never heard of. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. 50,000 here, 20,000 there. Money that should have been theirs had become money that was only his. She printed out the bank statements and highlighted every suspicious transaction. Then she moved on to their credit cards. The charges told a story she wished she had never learned to read. Expensive dinners for two at restaurants she had never been to. Hotel rooms in cities where Robert claimed to be on business trips alone. Jewelry purchases from stores she didn't recognize. Clothing from boutiques that sold women's sizes much smaller than hers. One charge made her hands shake with rage. A $5,000 payment to something called anniversary events planning. The date was 2 months ago. Robert had hired someone to plan their anniversary party. The party where he had humiliated her in front of everyone they knew. He had paid someone to orchestrate her destruction. Zara closed the laptop and walked to Robert's home office. She had always respected his privacy, never snooping through his papers or reading his emails. That respect ended now. She found the spare key hidden behind his law school diploma and unlocked his filing cabinets. Inside were documents that told an even worse story than the bank statements. Robert had consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys over the past 4 months. He had asset evaluation reports, custody recommendations. They had no children, but apparently he had explored every angle, and preliminary divorce agreements that left her with almost nothing. He had been planning this for months. At the bottom of one file folder, she found a letter from Candace. It was dated 6 weeks ago, written in looping feminine handwriting on expensive stationery. "My darling Robert," it began. "I can't wait until this is all over and we can finally be together openly. I know it's hard to keep pretending with her, but it won't be much longer. After the anniversary party, everyone will understand why you had to leave. She'll be so humiliated that she'll probably agree to anything just to make it go away quickly. Then we can start our real life together." The letter went on to describe their plans for the future. A house in California where Candace had family. A new business they would start together. A wedding in Napa Valley the following spring. They had planned everything. Every detail of Zara's destruction and their new beginning together. She sat in Robert's leather chair, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, and felt something she had never experienced before. Not just anger or hurt or disappointment. Something colder and more focused. She understood now that the man she had loved for 17 years didn't exist. He never had. The Robert she married was a performance, a role he played when it benefited him. The real Robert was capable of this level of calculation and cruelty. If he could plan her destruction so carefully she could return the favor. Zara spent the rest of the morning taking photographs of every document, every bank statement, every piece of evidence she could find. She uploaded everything to a secure cloud storage account and made copies of the most important papers. Then she made a list of everything she knew about Robert's business, his clients, his financial situation, and his secrets. It was a long list. After 17 years of marriage, she knew where all the bodies were buried. Her phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, she listened to the message. His voice was different than she remembered, harder, more businesslike. Like he was speaking to a client instead of the woman he had promised to love forever. Zara, we need to talk. I know last night was difficult, but this doesn't have to be ugly. I found an apartment downtown. We can work out the details like adults. Call me back. Like adults. As if she were a child having a tantrum instead of a wife whose husband had publicly humiliated her and stolen their money. Zara deleted the message and made another phone call instead. Monroe Law Offices, Patricia speaking. I need to speak with Patricia Monroe about a divorce case. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Monroe is booked solid for the next 2 weeks. Can I schedule you for? Tell her it's about Robert Johnson of Johnson Business Consulting. Tell her I have evidence of asset hiding and fraud. Tell her I can pay her fee in cash today. There was a pause. Please hold. Patricia Monroe came on the line 30 seconds later. Mrs. Johnson? I think we should meet as soon as possible. Patricia Monroe's office was nothing like Zara had expected. Instead of dark wood and intimidating law books, the space was bright and modern, with large windows and comfortable furniture. Patricia herself was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. I've heard of your husband, Patricia said without preamble as Zara sat down across from her desk. Johnson Business Consulting has quite a reputation in this city. Good or bad? Zara asked. That depends on whether you're his client or his competitor. Patricia opened a legal pad and picked up a pen. Now, tell me what happened last night. Zara told her everything. The anniversary party, the dance with Candace, the note delivered by the waiter. Patricia listened without interruption, taking notes in precise handwriting. And you found evidence of asset hiding? Patricia asked when Zara finished. Zara opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder. 6 months of bank records showing systematic transfers to accounts I've never heard of. Credit card statements showing he's been funding his affair with our money. And documents from his office showing he's been planning this divorce for months. Patricia flipped through the papers, her eyebrows rising higher with each page. This is very thorough work, Mrs. Johnson. I learned from the best. I helped Robert build his business from nothing. I know how he thinks and how he operates. Good. That's going to serve you well. Patricia set down the papers and looked directly at Zara. I need to ask you something important. What do you want from this divorce? I want what's fair. No, that's not what I'm asking. Patricia leaned forward. Your husband clearly thought he could manipulate and humiliate you into accepting whatever scraps he decided to throw your way. He underestimated you badly. So I'm asking again, what do you want? Zara was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. What did she want? She wanted her 17 years back. She wanted the trust she had given so freely. She wanted the dreams they had built together that turned out to be only her dreams. She wanted to never have felt the humiliation of watching him dance with another woman at their anniversary party. But she couldn't have any of those things. I want him to understand that actions have consequences, she said finally. I want him to learn that you can't destroy someone's life without paying a price. Patricia smiled for the first time since Zara had arrived. Now that's something I can work with. For the next 2 hours, Patricia walked Zara through the divorce process and explained her options. Because they lived in an equitable distribution state, Zara was entitled to half of everything they had acquired during the marriage. But Robert's asset hiding made things more complicated. If we can prove he deliberately concealed assets with the intent to defraud you in a divorce, the court can award you more than half, Patricia explained. Sometimes significantly more. What about his business? You helped build it. You have a claim to it. Patricia made more notes. What exactly was your role in Johnson Business Consulting? I did everything but carry the title. I helped him develop his client base, managed the books for the first 5 years, designed his marketing materials, organized his networking events. I was his unpaid business partner for over a decade. And your name isn't on any of the business documents? No. He said it would be better for tax purposes if everything was in his name. I trusted him. Patricia's expression darkened. Of course you did. You were married to him. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. Mrs. Johnson, I think we can make a very strong case that you're entitled to a substantial portion of his business assets. But I need to warn you this won't be easy or quick. Your husband strikes me as the type who will fight dirty. Let him fight. I'm not afraid of a war. Good. Because that's exactly what this is going to be. Patricia pulled out a contract and slid it across the desk. My retainer fee is $10,000. Normally I require payment up front, but given what you've shown me, I'm confident we'll recover enough to cover my fees and give you what you deserve. Zara signed the contract without hesitation. She had brought $15,000 in cash, withdrawn from one of the joint accounts that morning. If Robert wanted to play games with their money, she could play too. What happens next? Zara asked. First, we file for divorce and request temporary orders to prevent him from moving any more assets. Then we start the discovery process. We'll subpoena his bank records, business accounts, tax returns, everything. We'll also hire a forensic accountant to trace every penny he's hidden. How long will this take? That depends on how cooperative he is. If he fights us on everything, it could take a year or more. If he tries to be reasonable? Patricia shrugged. 6 months, maybe. Zara thought about Candace's letter, about their plans for a spring wedding in Napa Valley. He won't be reasonable. He thinks he's already won. Then he's in for a very rude awakening. Patricia stood up and walked to her filing cabinet. There's something else we should discuss. Based on what you've shown me, I think your husband may have committed fraud not just against you, but against his business partners and clients. What do you mean? Patricia pulled out a thick legal manual and flipped to a marked page. Asset hiding in a divorce is one thing. But if he's been using business funds for personal expenses, or if he's been billing clients for services he didn't provide so he could fund his affair, that's criminal fraud. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. You think he's committed crimes? I think it's worth investigating. And if he has? Patricia smiled grimly. Well, let's just say that criminal charges would give us tremendous leverage in the divorce proceedings. As Zara left Patricia's office an hour later, she felt like a different person than she had been that morning. The devastated wife who had cried herself to sleep was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and much more dangerous. Robert had made a crucial mistake. He had assumed she would be too broken or too embarrassed to fight back. He had counted on her love and loyalty to protect him even after he betrayed her. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. The next week passed in a blur of detective work that would have impressed any private investigator. Zara approached Robert's betrayal like a business problem that needed solving, and she had always been good at solving problems. She started with the obvious places. Robert's computer, which she accessed using a password she had watched him type 100 times. His email revealed months of correspondence with Candace that made Zara's stomach turn, but also provided valuable evidence of their affair and their plans. More importantly, she found emails between Robert and his business partners that raised serious questions about the company's finances. The Peterson contract payment came through last week. Robert had written to his partner James. I'm moving it to the development account for now until we figure out the tax situation. But Zara knew there was no development account on the company's official books. She had helped set up those books herself 5 years ago. She spent 2 days calling bank branches around the city, pretending to be Robert's assistant and asking about account balances. It was surprisingly easy. Most people were eager to help someone who sounded professional and knew the right account numbers. By Thursday, she had identified 4 secret accounts containing nearly $200,000. Money that should have been reported as business income and shared with Robert's partners. But the real breakthrough came when she decided to follow Robert. She borrowed Nicole's car and spent 3 days tracking her husband's movements. On Tuesday, he went to Candace's apartment and didn't leave until the next morning. On Wednesday, he had lunch with a man she didn't recognize at an expensive restaurant downtown. On Thursday, he went to a law office she had never heard of. The law office visit intrigued her most. Patricia had told her about Robert's previous attorney consultations, but this was a different firm. Why would he need another lawyer? That evening, she called the office pretending to be a potential client. Sterling and Associates, a receptionist answered. Hi, I was referred by Robert Johnson. He said you helped him with some business incorporation issues? Oh yes, Mr. Johnson. Let me transfer you to Mr. Sterling's assistant. Zara hung up quickly, but she had learned enough. Robert was setting up new business entities, probably to hide assets or income from the divorce proceedings. She spent Friday morning at the courthouse, searching public records for any recent business incorporations involving Robert's name or social security number. She found 3 new companies, all filed within the past 2 months: RJ Consulting Services, Pacific Business Solutions, and Candace Robert Enterprises. The last name made her laugh bitterly. Robert had named a company after himself and his mistress, like some twisted romantic gesture. That afternoon she received a call that changed everything. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Angela Reeves from Meridian Bank. I'm calling about your joint business account with Johnson Business Consulting. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I don't have a business account with you. According to our records, you're listed as a co-owner of account number 447199825537. The account was opened 3 years ago with both your signature and your husband's." Zara felt her heart start racing. "Can you tell me what's in that account?" "I can't give specific details over the phone, but I can tell you there's been some unusual activity recently. Large withdrawals and transfers. Since you're listed as a co-owner, I thought you should know." Zara was at Meridian Bank within an hour. The account contained over $300,000, money she had never known existed. But more shocking were the deposit records, which showed payments from dozens of companies she had never heard of. "These deposits," she asked the account manager, "do you know what they're for?" The young man looked at the records. According to the memo lines, they appear to be consulting fees. "Your husband's company has been receiving regular payments from all these different businesses." But Zara knew Johnson Business Consulting's official client list, and none of these companies were on it. Robert had been running some kind of side business, collecting money that his official partners didn't know about. She requested copies of all account records and left the bank with a folder full of evidence that could destroy Robert's reputation and possibly land him in prison. That evening she called Patricia with an update. "This is bigger than we thought," Patricia said after Zara explained what she had found. "Your husband isn't just hiding assets from you. He's been defrauding his business partners and possibly engaging in tax evasion." "What do I do with this information?" "We use it, but carefully. If we reveal everything at once, he might have time to cover his tracks or flee. We need to build an ironclad case first." Patricia recommended a forensic accountant named Bernard Hayes, who specialized in financial fraud cases. Zara met with him the next morning and turned over all the evidence she had gathered. "This is very impressive work," Bernard told her as he reviewed her files. "You missed your calling as a detective. I just want to know the truth. The truth is your husband has been very busy. Based on what you've shown me, I estimate he's hidden or stolen at least $500,000 over the past 3 years. Maybe more." The number hit Zara like a physical blow. $500,000. Money that could have secured their future, paid for the children they had talked about having, funded the dreams they had shared. Money that Robert had stolen and spent on his affair and his secret life. "Can you prove it?" she asked. "Give me 2 weeks. I'll trace every penny and document every crime. When I'm done, your husband is going to wish he had never learned to count." As Zara drove home that evening, she thought about the woman she had been just a week ago. That woman had been naive enough to believe in happy marriages and faithful husbands. She had been trusting enough to sign papers without reading them and to let someone else control the finances. That woman was gone forever. In her place was someone harder and smarter. Someone who understood that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford and that love without respect was just another word for exploitation. Robert had spent months planning her destruction. Now she was planning his. And unlike him, she was going to succeed. Bernard Hayes was worth every penny of his substantial fee. The forensic accountant worked with the precision of a surgeon and the determination of a bloodhound, and what he uncovered in Robert's financial records was worse than Zara had imagined. "Your husband is very creative," Bernard told her during their meeting 2 weeks later. "And very stupid." They sat in his downtown office, surrounded by boxes of documents and multiple computer screens showing spreadsheets that documented Robert's crimes in neat columns and rows. "He's been running at least 4 different schemes simultaneously," Bernard continued, pointing to different sections of his report. "First, he's been billing Johnson Business Consulting's official clients for services that his secret companies actually performed, then routing those payments through shell accounts." Zara studied the charts Bernard had created. So he would tell a client that Johnson Business Consulting would handle their project, but actually do the work through one of his secret companies? Exactly. The client pays Johnson Business Consulting thinking they're getting one service, but the work gets done by, say, RJ Consulting Services, which Robert owns entirely by himself. He keeps all the money instead of sharing it with his business partners. That's fraud. multiple counts of fraud. But that's not the worst part. Bernard pulled up another spreadsheet. He's also been creating fake clients and billing them for services that don't exist. The payments come from accounts he controls, but on paper it looks like legitimate business income. Zara felt sick. Money laundering. Right. He creates fake income to justify the cash he's spending on his affair, then uses various accounting tricks to make the taxes work out. It's actually quite sophisticated. Bernard showed her emails between Robert and someone named Mitchell Torres, who appeared to be helping him set up the fake companies and accounts. Your husband didn't do this alone, Bernard explained. Torres is probably taking a cut of everything. They're partners in crime literally. The third scheme was the most personal. Robert had been systematically overbilling Johnson Business Consulting's biggest clients, then pocketing the difference. Companies that thought they were paying standard rates were actually being charged premium prices, with Robert keeping the extra money for himself. And the fourth scheme? Zara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Bernard's expression grew even grimmer. Tax evasion. He's been reporting only a fraction of his actual income to the IRS. Based on my calculations, he owes at least $200,000 in back taxes and penalties. The room was quiet except for the hum of computers and the sound of Bernard's printer working overtime to produce copies of evidence. How much money are we talking about total? Zara asked finally. Conservative estimate? $800,000 over 3 years. Possibly more than $1 million if we include the tax liability. $1 million. Robert had stolen or hidden $1 million while telling Zara they needed to be careful with money, while suggesting she get a part-time job to help with expenses, while making her feel guilty for wanting to redecorate their bathroom. There's something else, Bernard said, pulling out a different folder. I think your husband is planning to disappear. He showed her evidence of Robert researching offshore banking, tax haven countries, and international business incorporation. There were browser history records showing visits to websites about living abroad and avoiding extradition. He's not just planning to divorce you and marry his mistress, Bernard explained. I think he's planning to take all this money and run. Probably somewhere without an extradition treaty. The betrayal cut even deeper than Zara had thought possible. Robert wasn't just leaving her for another woman. He was planning to steal everything they had built together and disappear, leaving her with nothing but debt and legal problems. What do I do? She asked. We call the FBI. The words hung in the air like smoke. Zara had been thinking about divorce and asset recovery. She hadn't been thinking about federal crimes and prison sentences. Are you sure? Bernard nodded grimly. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, these are serious federal crimes. Your husband is looking at decades in prison if convicted. And his partner Torres is probably looking at similar charges. But if I report this to the FBI, won't that complicate the divorce? Actually, it might help. If the federal government seizes his assets as proceeds of criminal activity, you might be able to claim victim status and recover some of the money. Plus, if he's in federal prison, he won't be able to fight the divorce or hide more assets. Zara thought about Candace's letter, about their plans for a spring wedding in Napa Valley, about the house in California and the new life they thought they were going to build with stolen money. How long would an investigation take? Federal investigations move slowly, but with this much evidence, they might act quickly to prevent him from destroying records or fleeing. I guess 6 months to a year for charges to be filed. That evening, Zara sat in her empty house and tried to process everything she had learned. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was a criminal. A sophisticated, calculating criminal who had been stealing money for years while lying to everyone who trusted him. She thought about his business partners, James and Samuel, who had worked with Robert for over a decade. They trusted him completely just like she had. They had no idea their partner was systematically robbing them. She thought about Robert's clients, successful businesses that had hired Johnson Business Consulting because they believed Robert was honest and competent. They were paying premium prices for services they didn't know they were getting, trusting someone who was betraying them every day. And she thought about herself, the wife who had supported Robert's career, defended his reputation, and believed in their future together while he methodically planned her destruction. The next morning she called Patricia. I want to report him to the FBI. Are you sure? Once we go down this path, there's no going back. Your husband will be facing serious prison time. Zara thought about the dance at their anniversary party, about Robert spinning Candace across the floor while their guests watched in horror. She thought about the note delivered by a waiter, about the months of planning and the $1 million in stolen money. He made his choice when he decided to destroy my life, Zara said firmly. Now I'm making mine. 3 days after Zara filed her report with the FBI, Robert came home. She was sitting in the living room when she heard his key in the lock. For a moment, hearing that familiar sound, she almost forgot everything that had happened. Almost forgot the betrayal and the lies and the stolen money. Almost remembered when that sound meant safety and love and coming home. Then Robert walked in and the illusion shattered. He looked different. Thinner, maybe, or just more tired. His usually perfect hair was messy, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. Good, Zara thought. We need to talk, Robert said, setting down a coffee cup from a shop she didn't recognize. Even his coffee was coming from somewhere else now. I agree. Robert sat down across from her, careful to maintain distance. Look, I know last week was rough, but this doesn't have to be a war. We can handle this like adults. There was that word again. Adults. As if she were being childish for objecting to being publicly humiliated and financially destroyed. You're right, Zara said calmly. Let's handle this like adults. Adults tell the truth. Something flickered in Robert's eyes. Unease, maybe, or calculation. What do you want to know? How long have you been stealing money from the business? Robert's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Zara pulled out a folder from the side table and set it on the coffee table between them. RJ Consulting Services. Pacific Business Solutions. Candace Robert Enterprises. The Meridian bank account with $300,000 that I supposedly co-owned but never knew about. The fake clients you've been billing for services that don't exist. Should I continue? Robert stared at the folder like it was a snake that might bite him. You went through my private papers. Your private papers about our joint assets and my financial future. Yes, I did. Zara leaned forward slightly. How long, Robert? He was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating how much she knew and how much he could still hide. Finally he sighed. 3 years. Maybe a little longer. How much? It's complicated. The money isn't gone, it's just moved around. For tax purposes. Zara laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Tax purposes. Is that what you call funding your affair with Candace? Robert's jaw tightened. That's different. Is it? Because my accountant estimates you've stolen or hidden over $1 million. That's a lot of tax planning. Your accountant? Robert's voice rose slightly. You hired an accountant? I hired several people. An accountant, a private investigator, an attorney. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not wasting time trusting a liar. Robert stood up and began pacing, his composure finally cracking. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The business was struggling. I had to make some creative financial moves to keep everything afloat. The business was struggling because you were robbing it. I was protecting it. Do you have any idea how competitive the consulting market is? I had to find new revenue streams, new ways to generate income. By creating fake companies and billing fake clients? By being flexible. By adapting to market conditions. Zara watched her husband of 17 years have what appeared to be a complete break from reality. He actually seemed to believe his own lies now. What about Candace? She asked quietly. Robert stopped pacing. What about her? How does she fit into your creative financial planning? She understands the business world. She understands pressure and competition and what it takes to succeed. She understands that you're a criminal who's been stealing money to pay for her lifestyle. Don't call me that. Robert's voice was sharp now, angry. I'm not a criminal. I'm a businessman making difficult decisions in a complex environment. You're a thief and a fraud and a liar. Zara's voice remained calm, which seemed to make Robert even angrier. And now you're going to face the consequences. What consequences? You think you can destroy me with some bank records and spreadsheets? I've been running businesses since before you knew what a profit margin was. Zara pulled out her phone and showed Robert a contact entry. Special Agent Jennifer Kim, FBI Financial Crimes Division. The blood drained from Robert's face. You called the FBI. I reported a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. My accountant was very thorough. Robert sat down heavily like his legs had stopped working. You can't. This will destroy everything. My reputation, my career, my future. You already destroyed those things. You destroyed them the moment you decided to steal money and cheat on your wife and plan to disappear with $1 million in stolen funds. I wasn't going to disappear. No? Then explain the research into offshore banking in non-extradition countries. Explain the consultations with international business attorneys. Explain the travel websites for one-way tickets to places without U.S. tax treaties. Robert put his head in his hands. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a criminal who thought he was smart enough to get away with it. You're a husband who thought his wife was too stupid and too trusting to figure out what you were doing. You're a man who planned to steal everything we built together and disappear with your mistress, leaving me with nothing but debt and humiliation. Zara stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden she had planted and tended for over a decade. Another thing she had built that Robert had been planning to abandon. The FBI will probably arrest you within the week, she said without turning around. Special Agent Kim says they have enough evidence for multiple federal indictments. Your business partners will find out that you've been stealing from them for years. Your clients will learn that you've been overcharging them and using their money to fund your affair. And Candace will discover that the man she thought was going to give her a fairy tale life is actually heading to federal prison. Zara, please. Robert's voice was broken now, desperate. We can work this out. We can fix this. I'll give you whatever you want in the divorce. I'll make sure you're taken care of. She turned to face him, and he flinched at what he saw in her eyes. You had 17 years to take care of me, Robert. You chose to betray me instead. Now you'll have the next 10 to 20 years in federal prison to think about that choice. Robert tried one more approach, the one that had worked on her for years. He softened his voice, made his eyes gentle, reached for the charm that had made her fall in love with him decades ago. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But deep down you know I love you. We can get through this together like we always have. No, Zara said simply. We can't. Because there is no we anymore. There probably never was. There was just me loving a man who didn't exist and you playing a role until you found something better. Robert stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the exact moment when he realized that charm and manipulation weren't going to work anymore. The mask finally fell away completely and she saw him as he really was. Selfish, calculating, and utterly without remorse. You'll regret this, he said, his voice cold now. When I'm gone and you're alone in this house with nothing but your bitter victory, you'll regret destroying the only man who ever loved you. Zara smiled, and it was the most genuinely happy expression that had crossed her face in months. Robert, I stopped loving you the moment you danced with her at our anniversary party. Everything since then has just been cleaning up the mess you made of our lives. And I'm very good at cleaning up messes. Robert left that night, and Zara never saw him as a free man again. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Zara knew because Special Agent Kim called her an hour later to let her know that Robert was in federal custody. We got him at his apartment downtown, Agent Kim explained, along with his partner Mitchell Torres and enough evidence to put them both away for a very long time. Zara was making coffee in the kitchen that had witnessed so many of her marriage's happier moments. The morning light streaming through the windows felt different now, brighter, cleaner, like the world had been washed overnight. What happens next? She asked. Arraignment this afternoon. The judge will set bail, though given the flight risk and the amount of money involved, it's going to be substantial. Then we move toward trial, though most cases like this end in plea bargains. How long will he get? Conservative estimate? 15 to 20 years. If we can prove he was planning to flee the country, maybe more. After Agent Kim hung up, Zara sat in her quiet kitchen and tried to figure out what she felt. She had expected satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, she felt something more complex. Relief, yes. Vindication, certainly. But also a kind of sadness for the life she had thought she was living and the man she had thought she was married to. Her phone started ringing at 8 a.m. and didn't stop until evening. Reporters who had gotten wind of the arrest. Friends who had heard the news and didn't know what to say. Robert's business partners, who were trying to understand how their company had been used as cover for criminal activity. The call that surprised her most came from Candace. Mrs. Johnson? The voice was young and scared and nothing like the confident woman Zara had watched dancing at her anniversary party. What do you want? I need to explain. About Robert and me. About what happened. I don't need an explanation. I need you to never call this number again. Please just listen for a minute. I didn't know about the money. I swear I didn't know he was stealing. Zara almost hung up, but something in the younger woman's voice stopped her. Fear, maybe, or genuine desperation. Go on. When Robert told me about the divorce, he said you two had grown apart. He said it was mutual, that you both wanted different things. He never said anything about public humiliation or stealing money or any of this. You were at our anniversary party. You danced with my husband in front of everyone we know. That wasn't mutual. Candace was quiet for a moment. He told me you knew. He said you had agreed to the party as a way to announce that you were separating. He said it was your idea to make it public so there wouldn't be any gossip or rumors. The lie was so outrageous that Zara almost laughed. Almost. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. I loved him. I thought he loved me. What do you want from me, Candace? I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe? Understanding? I lost my job when the FBI arrested him. Apparently, I was being paid with stolen money. My apartment lease is in his name, and the FBI froze all his accounts. I have nowhere to go. Zara thought about this for a moment. The other woman, the one who had helped destroy her marriage, was now as much a victim of Robert's lies as anyone else. Maybe more because she had actually believed his promises about their future together. That's not my problem, Zara said finally. I know it's not. But I thought maybe if I explained. Explained what? That you were naive enough to believe a married man who told you his wife was okay with his affair? That you were greedy enough to enjoy a lifestyle funded by stolen money without asking where it came from? That you were cruel enough to dance with him at our anniversary party even if you thought I was okay with it? I'm sorry. Candace was crying now. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the money dried up. You're sorry your fairy tale turned into a nightmare. But you're not sorry you helped a man destroy his wife's life, because you still think you were entitled to take what you wanted. Zara hung up and blocked the number. Over the next few weeks, Robert's world collapsed completely. The local newspapers picked up the story of the prominent businessman arrested for fraud and embezzlement. Johnson Business Consulting went into bankruptcy as clients fled and creditors demanded payment. Robert's partners filed their own lawsuits, claiming they had been defrauded by their trusted colleague. The house of cards that Robert had built over 3 years fell apart in 3 weeks. Zara watched it all with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. She had known Robert was dishonest, but she hadn't realized how extensive his lies were or how many people he had been betraying simultaneously. His bail was set at $2 million, secured by property he didn't actually own and accounts that had already been frozen. He remained in federal detention, awaiting trial. Patricia called with updates on the divorce proceedings. With the criminal charges, this is going to be much simpler than we thought, she explained. The court has already frozen all marital assets pending the outcome of the federal case. When those assets are released, you'll be entitled to recover your portion plus damages for the fraud. How much are we talking about? Conservatively? Everything. The house, the business assets, the hidden accounts, plus penalties and interest. Robert's going to prison with nothing but the clothes on his back. And Candace? She's been cooperating with federal investigators. Apparently, she's providing testimony about Robert's financial activities in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Smart girl, though I doubt she's feeling very smart right now. That evening, Zara walked through the house she had shared with Robert for over a decade. Every room held memories of their life together, but they felt like memories of a movie she had watched rather than a life she had lived. The marriage had been real to her but not to him. The love had been genuine on her part but performed on his. She had spent 17 years building a life with someone who was planning to steal it from her. But now, for the first time since that terrible anniversary party, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation or forgiveness or getting back what she had lost. Hope for something entirely new. Hope for a future that belonged only to her, built on truth instead of lies, funded by money she had earned instead of money that had been stolen. Robert had tried to destroy her, but he had failed. He had broken her heart and betrayed her trust and stolen her money, but he hadn't broken her spirit. And now he was going to pay for every lie he had told and every dollar he had stolen, while she rebuilt her life into something better than what they had shared. Justice, it turned out, was better than revenge. 6 months later, Zara sat in a federal courtroom watching her ex-husband face the consequences of 17 years of lies. Robert looked smaller somehow, diminished by months in detention and the weight of evidence against him. The confident businessman who had once charmed clients and investors was gone, replaced by a man who seemed to shrink every time the prosecutor spoke. The trial had been swift and devastating. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had built a case so thorough that even Robert's expensive defense attorneys couldn't find gaps to exploit. Bank records, email communications, testimony from victims, it all painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning years. Your Honor, the prosecutor said during her closing argument, the defendant didn't just steal money. He stole trust. He stole the faith that his business partners placed in him, the confidence that his clients had in his integrity, and 17 years of his wife's life. Zara sat in the gallery, wearing a simple black dress and watching the man she had once loved try to disappear into his chair. She felt nothing for him now, not anger, not sadness, not even pity. He had become a stranger who happened to share some of her memories. The prosecution had called her as a witness the week before. She had testified about the hidden accounts, the asset transfers, the evidence she had gathered. She spoke clearly and calmly about discovering her husband's betrayal and the systematic theft of their joint assets. Robert's attorney had tried to cross-examine her, to make her seem vindictive or bitter. But Patricia had prepared her well, and Zara stuck to the facts. Numbers don't lie, and the numbers told a story of calculated theft and fraud. "Mrs. Johnson," the defense attorney had asked, "isn't it true that you were angry about your husband's affair and decided to destroy him out of revenge?" "I was angry," Zara had replied. "But I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself when he chose to commit crimes. I just documented what he had already done." The jury had been out for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Robert closed his eyes when the verdict was read. Behind him in the gallery, his elderly parents wept quietly. Candace wasn't there. She had moved back to her hometown in Ohio after testifying for the prosecution. "Sentencing will be in 30 days, the judge announced. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Zara, asking for her reaction. She had prepared a brief statement. "Justice has been served today, not just for me but for everyone Robert Johnson defrauded. I hope this case sends a message that no one is above the law, no matter how charming or successful they appear to be." Patricia walked her to the car through the crowd of cameras and microphones. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked as they drove away from the courthouse. "Tired," Zara said honestly. "Ready for this part to be over." The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier. With Robert's criminal conviction, the court had awarded Zara virtually everything: the house, the legitimate business assets, and the recovered stolen funds. After legal fees and back taxes, she was left with nearly $800,000 and a house worth another $400,000. More importantly, she was free. The sentencing hearing was smaller, quieter. Robert's parents had flown in from Florida, hoping their son might receive leniency. His sister had written a letter to the judge describing the loving brother she remembered from childhood. None of it mattered. "Mr. Johnson," the judge said, looking down at the man who had once commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar contracts, "you have betrayed the trust of everyone who believed in you. Your crimes were not committed in a moment of desperation but were planned and executed over years with sophisticated planning." The judge sentenced Robert to 18 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he might be eligible for parole in 12 years. He would be nearly 60 when he got out, if he got out. As the bailiffs led Robert away in shackles, he looked back at the gallery one last time. His eyes found Zara's, and she saw something she had never seen before in his face: genuine regret. Not regret for being caught. Not regret for going to prison. Regret for what he had lost when he chose crime over family, lies over love, selfishness over partnership. Zara didn't look away. She wanted him to see that she was no longer the trusting wife who had believed his lies. She was someone harder now, someone who had learned that love without respect is worthless and trust without verification is dangerous. Then Robert was gone, and Zara walked out of the federal courthouse a free woman. That evening, she sat in her kitchen now, legally and completely, and opened a bottle of wine she had been saving for 17 years. It was a wedding gift she and Robert had planned to drink on their 20th anniversary. Instead, she drank it alone to celebrate the end of a marriage that had been built on lies and the beginning of a life that would be built on truth. The wine was excellent. The silence was even better. For the first time in months, Zara slept peacefully, knowing that the man who had betrayed her was locked in a federal prison cell, counting the cost of every lie he had told and every dollar he had stolen. Justice was complete. Now she could begin the real work of rebuilding her life. 1 year after Robert's sentencing, Zara stood in the conference room of her new office building, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was bright and modern, nothing like the dark, traditional offices where she had once helped Robert build his fraudulent empire. "The foundation paperwork is all filed," her attorney said, sliding a folder across the conference table. "Congratulations, you're officially the founder and president of the Phoenix Foundation for Financial Justice." Zara had spent months planning the foundation, using a portion of the recovered stolen money to create something meaningful from the wreckage of her marriage. The Phoenix Foundation would provide legal assistance and financial counseling to victims of white-collar crime, particularly women who had been financially abused by their spouses or partners. "We've already received over 100 applications for assistance," her new assistant Rebecca told her. Women who've discovered hidden debts, secret accounts, stolen assets. Stories that sound very familiar. Zara nodded. In the year since Robert's arrest, she had received hundreds of emails and letters from women who had read about her case in the news. Women who had discovered they were married to men who were systematically stealing from them. Women who had been told they were stupid or paranoid when they questioned suspicious financial activity. Women who had loved completely and been betrayed absolutely. "We'll help as many as we can," Zara said. "That's what this is for." The foundation wasn't her only new venture. She had also purchased Johnson Business Consulting's client list and remaining assets at bankruptcy auction, then launched her own consulting firm, Zara Johnson Strategic Solutions. Several of Robert's former clients had already signed contracts, drawn by her reputation for honesty and her intimate knowledge of what could go wrong when business owners cut corners. "The irony is delicious," Patricia had told her. "You're literally building success from the ruins of his crimes." But the most important change in Zara's life wasn't professional. It was personal. Thomas Reed was nothing like Robert. Where Robert had been flashy and charming, Thomas was quiet and thoughtful. Where Robert had been a master manipulator, Thomas was almost painfully honest. Where Robert had promised the world and delivered betrayal, Thomas made small promises and kept every one of them. They had met at a coffee shop near the courthouse during one of the pre-trial hearings. Thomas was a social worker who had been testifying in a different case, and they had started talking while waiting for their respective proceedings to begin. "I don't usually date women who are in the middle of federal fraud cases," he had told her with a smile that made her forget, for just a moment, why she was at the courthouse. "I don't usually date anyone," she had replied. "I'm a little busy destroying my criminal ex-husband's life." Their first real date had been 6 months after Robert's sentencing. Dinner at a quiet restaurant where Thomas listened to her story without judgment and shared his own experiences working with families torn apart by financial abuse. "The hardest part," he had told her, "is helping people trust again. When someone you love steals from you, it damages more than your bank account. It damages your ability to believe in anyone." He was right. Even now, a year later, Zara found herself checking and double-checking financial statements, verifying information that Thomas shared about himself, looking for lies that weren't there. The habits of suspicion were hard to break. But Thomas was patient. He showed her his tax returns without being asked. He introduced her to his family early in their relationship. He was transparent about his finances, his past relationships, and his intentions in a way that Robert never had been. "Trust but verify," he had told her when she apologized for asking to see his credit report. Ronald Reagan was talking about nuclear disarmament, but it applies to dating too. Their relationship moved slowly, carefully. Thomas understood that Zara needed time to heal, needed space to rebuild her identity as someone other than Robert's victim. He supported her foundation work, celebrated her business success, and never pushed for more than she was ready to give. "I'm not going anywhere," he told her one evening as they walked through the park near her house. "Take all the time you need." It was the opposite of everything Robert had been. Instead of pressure, patience. Instead of promises, presence. Instead of grand gestures, small kindnesses that proved themselves over time. 6 months into their relationship, Zara realized she was no longer thinking about Robert every day. The man who had dominated her thoughts for 2 decades, first with love, then with rage, had become irrelevant to her daily life. She was happy. Not the desperate, clinging happiness she had felt during her marriage, always worried it might disappear. This was something steadier, calmer, built on a foundation of self-respect and genuine partnership rather than dependence and illusion. "You look different," Nicole told her over lunch one afternoon. "Stronger. More yourself." Zara considered this. "I think I am more myself. For 17 years, I was trying to be the person Robert wanted me to be. Now I'm just being the person I actually am." "And who is that?" Zara smiled. "Someone who doesn't accept lies. Someone who verifies everything. Someone who builds her own security instead of depending on someone else for it. Someone who helps other women avoid the mistakes I made." The Phoenix Foundation was growing quickly. They had helped recover over $2 million in stolen assets for their clients in just 6 months of operation. More importantly, they had helped dozens of women find the courage to leave abusive situations and rebuild their lives. "You're turning your worst experience into other people's salvation," Thomas had observed. "That's remarkable." "It's practical," Zara had replied. "I learned how to fight back. Now I can teach other people." As she stood in her foundation's conference room, looking out at the city where she had been betrayed and where she had found justice, Zara reflected on how completely her life had changed. A year ago, she had been married to a criminal who was planning to destroy her. Now she was an independent businesswoman helping other victims while building a relationship based on honesty and respect. Robert was serving his time in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. According to Patricia, who monitored his case, he had filed several appeals, all of which had been denied. He would be eligible for parole in 11 more years. Candace had disappeared entirely. The last anyone had heard, she had moved to Ohio and was working as a secretary for a small accounting firm. The glamorous life she had thought she was building with Robert's stolen money was gone forever. Zara felt no satisfaction in their misery anymore. They had become irrelevant to her happiness, footnotes in a story that was now about rebuilding rather than revenge. Mrs. Johnson? Rebecca interrupted her thoughts. Your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Jennifer Walsh, the woman whose husband emptied their retirement accounts. Send her in, Zara said, straightening her shoulders. Let's see how we can help her. As Jennifer Walsh walked into the conference room, another woman betrayed by someone she trusted. Another victim who needed help fighting back. Zara felt the satisfaction of purpose. This was what she was meant to do now. Not just survive betrayal but help others do the same. The Phoenix Foundation's motto, printed on every document and displayed on the wall behind Zara's desk, summed up everything she had learned: rising stronger from betrayal's ashes. It was more than a business slogan. It was the truth about what was possible when someone refused to stay a victim. 2 years after the anniversary party that changed everything, Zara stood in the ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel, the same venue where Robert had danced with Candace while their guests watched in horror. Tonight, the room was filled with different people celebrating a different kind of milestone. The Phoenix Foundation's second anniversary gala was in full swing. Nearly 300 people had come to celebrate the foundation's work and honor the women who had found the courage to fight back against financial abuse. When I started this foundation, Zara said into the microphone at the front of the room, I thought I was helping other women. But the truth is, helping them has healed me in ways I never expected. The audience applauded as she gestured toward a table near the front where 6 women sat together, all former clients who had recovered stolen assets and rebuilt their lives. These women taught me that survival isn't enough. Recovery isn't enough. True justice means taking what someone tried to use to destroy you and turning it into something that makes you stronger. In the crowd, Thomas smiled at her with the pride and support she had never seen in Robert's eyes. Her parents beamed from their table near the front. Nicole wiped away tears as she listened to her sister speak about transformation and triumph. But the moment that mattered most to Zara came after the formal program ended. A young woman approached her near the bar, clutching a champagne glass with trembling hands. Mrs. Johnson? I'm Angela Martinez. I don't know if you remember, but you helped me 6 months ago when I discovered my husband was gambling away our savings. Zara remembered. Angela's husband had stolen nearly $100,000 from their joint accounts to feed a sports betting addiction, then tried to convince Angela that she was imagining the missing money. Of course I remember. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Better than great. Angela's smile was radiant. I left him just like you advised. I got a lawyer, recovered most of the money, and started my own business. I'm here tonight because I wanted to thank you, but also because I wanted you to know I'm getting married again. Congratulations. Tell me about him. He's nothing like my ex-husband. He's honest and kind, and he actually shows me his bank statements without me having to ask. Angela laughed. He thinks I'm a little paranoid about money, but he understands why. Trust but verify, Zara said with a smile. Exactly. But the best part is I'm not afraid anymore. When my ex-husband stole from me, I thought it meant I was stupid and naive and could never trust anyone again. But you showed me that it just meant I had to trust differently. Smarter. After Angela walked away to rejoin her fiancé, Zara found herself standing alone for a moment, looking around the ballroom where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. The space looked different now. Instead of the elegant but cold atmosphere of her anniversary party, tonight the room felt warm and alive. Instead of guests whispering about scandal and betrayal, people were celebrating courage and recovery. Instead of watching her husband dance with his mistress, Zara was surrounded by people who respected and supported her. Penny for your thoughts? Thomas appeared beside her, offering her a fresh glass of champagne. I was just thinking about how different this room feels tonight. Good different or weird different? Good different. Healing different. Zara took a sip of champagne and looked around at the celebration. 2 years ago, I stood in this exact spot and watched my world fall apart. Tonight, I'm standing in the same spot watching other women celebrate putting their worlds back together. Thomas followed her gaze to where several former clients were laughing together at a nearby table. "You've built something incredible here." "We've built something incredible," Zara corrected him. "The foundation, the business, this life, none of it would have happened without your support." It was true. Thomas had been beside her for every milestone, every victory, every setback. When she worked late preparing legal documents for clients, he brought her dinner and sat quietly reading while she worked. When she doubted whether the foundation was making a real difference, he reminded her of the women whose lives had been transformed. When she struggled with trusting him, he patiently proved his reliability day after day until her fears began to fade. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" Thomas said quietly. "Only every day." Zara smiled. "Have I mentioned that I love you too?" "Not often enough." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the party swirl around them. Near the dance floor, several couples were dancing to the jazz band Zara had hired. The music was upbeat and joyful, nothing like the melancholy songs that had played during her anniversary party. "Would you like to dance?" Thomas asked. "In this room?" Zara hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "We can make new memories," Thomas said gently. "Better ones." As they walked onto the dance floor, Zara thought about everything that had changed since the last time she had danced in this room. Then, she had been clinging to a marriage that was already dead, trying to love someone who was incapable of loving her back. Now, she was choosing to dance with someone who had proven his love through actions rather than words, consistency rather than grand gestures. The band began playing at last, the same song Robert had danced to with Candace, the same song that had once been hers and Robert's special song. For a moment, Zara tensed, but Thomas felt her reaction and pulled her closer. "New memories," he whispered in her ear. "This is our song now." As they swayed together to music that had once represented her greatest humiliation, Zara realized something profound had happened. The song no longer belonged to Robert and her failed marriage. It didn't even belong to Robert and Candace. It belonged to her and Thomas, to this moment, to the life she had built from the ashes of betrayal. At last indeed. When the song ended, the crowd of foundation supporters and former clients applauded not just the performance but the moment itself. A woman who had been publicly humiliated in this very room now dancing with joy in the same space. "Thank you," Zara told the crowd, still in Thomas's arms. "Thank you for celebrating not just what we've accomplished, but what's possible when we refuse to let betrayal define us." Later that evening, as the last guests were leaving and the staff was cleaning up, Zara walked to the large windows that overlooked the city. Thomas joined her, loosening his tie after the long evening. "Any regrets?" he asked. Zara considered the question seriously. Did she regret the 17 years she had spent married to Robert? The trust she had given so freely? The pain of discovering his betrayal? "No," she said finally. "Not anymore. If Robert hadn't betrayed me, I never would have discovered how strong I actually am. I never would have built the foundation. I never would have met you. I never would have learned the difference between love and dependence." "So you're grateful to him?" "I'm grateful for what I learned from surviving him. There's a difference." As they walked to their car, Zara's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, her old paranoia flared during the investigation and trial. She had received threatening messages from people who thought she was being vindictive toward Robert. But this message was different. "Mrs. Johnson, my name is Sandra Chin. I read about your foundation in the newspaper. My husband has been stealing from our business and I think he's planning to leave me. I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" Zara showed the message to Thomas, who shook his head with a mixture of sadness and admiration. "Even at your celebration, someone else is living your nightmare. Which is exactly why the foundation exists." Zara typed back quickly, "Sandra, call me tomorrow at 9 a.m. You're not alone and you're stronger than you think. We'll figure this out together." As they drove home through the quiet city streets, Zara reflected on how completely her life had been transformed. 2 years ago, she had been a wife desperately trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Tonight, she was a woman who had built something meaningful from the wreckage of that marriage. Robert was still in federal prison serving his 18-year sentence. According to the last report Patricia had received, he had been denied parole consideration due to poor behavior and refusal to participate in rehabilitation programs. He would likely serve the full sentence. Candace had disappeared entirely from their city. The last anyone had heard, she was working at a small office job in Ohio and living with her parents. The glamorous life she had thought she was building with stolen money had evaporated the moment Robert was arrested. But Zara no longer thought about them regularly. They had become part of her past, not her present. The anger and desire for revenge that had once consumed her had been replaced by something more powerful: purpose. "I have something to tell you," Thomas said as they pulled into Zara's driveway. The house was dark and peaceful, a far cry from the tension and secrecy that had filled it during her marriage to Robert. "Good something or bad something?" "Good something. Great something, actually." Thomas turned off the engine and faced her. "I got the promotion. Regional director, starting next month." Zara threw her arms around him, genuinely thrilled for his success. "Thomas, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me during the party?" "Because tonight was your night. Your foundation, your celebration, your moment. I didn't want to distract from that." It was such a Thomas thing to say, thoughtful, selfless, completely opposite to how Robert would have handled good news. Robert would have announced his promotion during her speech, making sure he was the center of attention. "We should celebrate," Zara said. "Both of us. Your promotion and the foundation's success." "Actually, I was hoping we could celebrate something else too." Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Zara's breath caught. "Thomas? I know we've talked about taking things slowly. I know you needed time to heal and learn to trust again. And I know that marriage probably isn't something you're eager to think about after what you went through with Robert." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring, nothing flashy or ostentatious, just beautiful and honest, like everything else about Thomas. "But I love you, Zara. Not the woman you were when you were married to him, not the woman you became when you were fighting him, but the woman you are now. Strong and independent and incredibly brave. I want to build a life with you, a real partnership based on truth and respect and genuine love." Zara stared at the ring, then at Thomas's face, which showed nervous hope and absolute sincerity. This was nothing like Robert's proposal 17 years earlier, which had been full of grand gestures and dramatic declarations. Thomas was offering something quieter but infinitely more valuable. Genuine partnership with someone who had proven his character over time. "I need you to understand something," Zara said carefully. "If we do this, if we get married, I need you to know that I'll never be the trusting wife I was before. I'll always verify. I'll always ask questions. I'll always protect myself." "I wouldn't want you to be any other way," Thomas replied. "I fell in love with the woman who refuses to be a victim, not the woman who was fooled by lies. I want to marry someone who's too smart to be deceived and too strong to be destroyed." Zara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The devastating betrayal that had nearly broken her. The long process of discovery and investigation. The satisfaction of seeing justice done. The healing that had come from helping other women. The slow, careful building of trust with someone who deserved it. "Yes," she said simply. Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger, and Zara was surprised to feel tears on her cheeks. Happy tears, she realized. The first purely joyful tears she had cried in years. "I love you," she told him. "And I trust you. And that's not something I say lightly anymore." "I know," Thomas said, holding her close. "That's why it means everything." As they sat in the car in her driveway, Zara looked at the house where she had discovered Robert's betrayal and made the decision to fight back. Tomorrow she would start planning another kind of future, not one built on illusions and dependence, but one based on mutual respect and proven character. She thought about Sandra Chin, the woman who had texted her tonight. Tomorrow, Zara would help another victim find the courage to investigate her suspicions and fight for justice. The cycle would continue, women helping women, survivors teaching victims how to become survivors themselves. But tonight, she was just a woman who had been broken by betrayal and had chosen to rebuild herself into something stronger. A woman who had turned her worst experience into her greatest purpose. A woman who had learned that love without respect is worthless, but love built on truth and partnership is priceless. The dance that had ended her marriage had been performed in front of an audience that pitied her. The dance she had shared with Thomas tonight had been witnessed by an audience that admired her. That was the difference between being someone's victim and being your own hero. As they walked into the house together, Zara took one last look at the engagement ring sparkling on her finger. It caught the light from the porch lamp, throwing tiny rainbows across the darkness. Just like her life, taking something that had been shattered and turning it into something beautiful. The story that had begun with humiliation and betrayal was ending with love and triumph. Not because she had gotten revenge on Robert, though justice had certainly been served, but because she had refused to let his betrayal define her future. She had risen from the ashes of her marriage stronger, wiser, and more capable of genuine love than she had ever been before. That was the real victory. Not destroying the man who had tried to destroy her, but building something better from what he had left behind. And tomorrow she would help another woman do the same thing. The phoenix flies highest after the fire burns hottest. Zara Johnson had learned that lesson the hard way, but she had learned it completely. Now she was ready to teach it to others.